Hello, and welcome to Opening Bars. Lionel Richie is a prolific and talented multi-platinum award-winning American songwriter who for many years was lead singer and songwriter for the Commodores, and who later enjoyed an extremely successful solo career. Of all of the ballads and love songs Lionel has written, this one from 1977 is one of my favorites. Let's take a look. On the grand staff for this piece, we'll use the treble clef with a small 8 underneath to indicate that the piano notes will be played an octave lower than written, and we'll also use the same treatment on the bass clef, playing an octave lower than written. There are 4 flats in the key signature, so we are either in A flat major or F minor. The time signature is 4/4. Let's start with the right hand and take a look at the chord reduction. The first chord is an A flat, C, and E flat in their closest closed position, which is A flat major in root position. In the next triad, we'll keep the E flat as the topmost note and move the thirds down to a G and B flat respectively. Notice that I've written an E flat major above this chord, and just disregard the /C for the moment. In the next measure, you'll see that I've done the same thing again as we move that entire triad in second inversion down from E flat to D flat major. The final 2 measures are reiterations of the first 2, so that's straightforward. Taking a look at the left hand, we can now see how the chord symbols with a slash behind them indicate the lowest bass note. While this is extremely helpful for sight reading or playing this particular chart, it doesn't necessarily help us with the overall harmonic analysis. You can see that I've actually written a more accurate chord naming scheme in between the staffs as well. The first chord only contains 3 distinct notes, so it can remain as an A flat major in root position. The second chord has 4 distinct notes, a C, E flat, G, and B flat. Add those all together and we have a C minor chord with an added 7th. Similarly, we can see that the next chord contains 4 distinct notes, a B flat, D flat, F, and an additional A flat, creating a B flat minor 7. For the second half of that measure, we move to the dominant or 5 chord on the E flat, adding a 7th and utilizing the 9th and 11th as suspensions. And finally, the last 2 measures on this page are duplicates of the first 2, except that the final note in the left hand remains on the B flat. So we are in A flat major, and that is the first chord that we begin with. Let's label that with a capital letter I. The next chord is C minor 7, so that will be 3/7, with the letters I all in lowercase to show that it is a minor chord. The B flat minor 7 chord is marked 2/7, and you can see that the right hand chord remains the same for beat 3, but the fundamental note underneath changes in the bass to an E flat. I suppose you could mark that as 5/11, but it feels like it is meant to be a 5 chord with 2 suspensions. The A flat is the 4 and the F is the 2. Remember that harmonic analysis is meant to not only identify the vertical nature of the chord, but also its function. So in this instance, that chord's purpose is to act as a mini cadence as it moves to the tonic chord in measure 3. The final 3 chords are the same as the first 3 chords. You'll also notice at the end measure that I've notated a courtesy clef to let you know that the next segment of music is going to be written in the treble clef for the right hand. Okay, now let's move on to the rhythm. This is fairly straightforward, as you can see that the right hand rhythm remains the same in each measure. So we have a dotted 8th note coupled with a 16th motif, and then an inverse 16th note attached to a dotted 8th. The most effective way to learn this little rhythm would be to break it down into its component 16th notes. So that would mean the very first chord would receive 3 16th notes, the A flat, the 4th 16th. The next interval would receive the 5th 16th note, and the final A flat the remaining 3 16ths. So let's try and put that together now, with the notes, while counting the 16ths slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. When you're ready, add the left hand to steady your progress through the fragment, like this. Essentially, in its most basic form, this is not difficult at all. Just make sure you practice deliberately to get the pattern securely under your fingers before moving on. The fun really begins when we try to give it some style. You can hear very distinctly in the recording that the offbeat of 2 and 4 is accented, notated as a smaller greater than sign above or below the note head. A great temptation for pianists when executing an accent is, in their attempt for more velocity, to rush the note and play it too early, if even only very slightly. Let me play it both ways now, one where it is unrhythmically rushed, and the other played a little bit more accurately. Here we go. And now with the accent placed more carefully within the rhythmic framework. Now that you know all of the notes and the basic rhythms, let's look at ways to advance our musicianship by addressing style. If we wish to mimic the style of the actual recording, you can see here in the score that I've notated it somewhat differently to reflect that. The important part to remember here is that the essential pulse of this particular riff remains solidly on 1 and 3, so be sure to strike those together with the bass notes appropriately. The accented notes then become like an inner melody themselves, so be sure to emphasize that in your performance, like this. And finally, to add even a little bit more style to this fragment, let's try to think like a bass player. I've added a suggestion in the form of grace notes to the actual bass line as a suggestion of what a real bass player might actually do. These are not to be played like grace notes, but just a notational strategy to not clutter up the score. Examples of additional notes you might use are semitones, thirds, turns, and what I call a strum. Try out different variations, perhaps something like this. Or maybe something like this. Have fun and explore. I hope you enjoyed your lesson today. Remember, don't just play notes. Make music. Until next time, thanks for listening.